I rise before the sun, though truth be told it is not the sun that wakes me, it is the city itself. Rome stirs early, like a restless animal, and I have learned to move with it, not against it. The air is still cool at this hour, the stones damp from the night, carrying with them a faint smell of smoke, sewage, and the sea salt that clings to every breeze drifting in from the Tiber. I am no one of importance, just a man who has lived too long in the shadow of the great amphitheatre, selling what I can, watching what I must. I do not wear fine clothes, nor do I carry a purse heavy with coins. My sandals are cracked, my tunic patched more times than I can count. Yet I have seen Rome in ways the patricians never do. I have smelled her when she wakes, when she sweats, when she bleeds. And always, always I have lived with the echo of the gladiators. Men both feared and worshipped, their lives tethered to the whims of a crowd that cannot decide whether to adore them or despise them. Before dawn the streets are quieter, though never truly silent. Somewhere a baker feeds his ovens, and the warm smell of barley bread begins to rise like incense into the air. A mule cart clatters over uneven stones, carrying amphorae of wine toward the taverns that will be full by nightfall. From the upper floors of insulae, those crowded, crumbling apartments where families stack like bricks, I hear the coughing of children, the whispered quarrel of a husband and wife, the creak of shutters, opening to let in what little light will soon arrive. I walk these streets with my basket empty, ready to fill with whatever I might trade today. Some mornings it is figs, other mornings cheap oil or herbs. I have long stopped planning too carefully, for Rome is fickle. What sells one day will rot the next, and what no one wanted yesterday suddenly becomes prized when rumour whispers of a shortage. I listen more than I speak, for in Rome, listening is worth more than coin. And the whispers are always the same. Even in these first quiet hours, when most men's thoughts should be on bread, or work, or family, there is always someone murmuring about the games that will come, the games that never truly leave us, because even when the Colosseum sleeps, its shadow stretches across our days. You must understand, the gladiators live among us, yet apart from us. They are men, but not men as we are. We do not eat their food, nor share their beds, nor walk freely where they walk. Still, they haunt our thoughts. Each morning, as the city begins to stir, I think of them in their barracks beyond the wall, already awake. I imagine the clatter of wooden swords striking shields, the barked orders of the lanista, the groans of bodies pushed past endurance. And I wonder, do they think of us as we think of them? Do they imagine the faces of the common crowd, the same way we imagine theirs? A strange thing, to both fear and envy a man. Stranger still, to cheer for him with your throat raw one moment, then wish him dead the next. Rome has taught us to hold these contradictions without shame. Perhaps it is not our shame at all, but theirs. I pause by the fountain, filling a small jug with water. The stone is slick, worn smooth by years of hands far cleaner than mine. A woman nearby hums softly to her child, the melody almost lost beneath the splash of the water. Her eyes, though, glance often toward the looming shape of the amphitheatre, visible even now against the pale light of dawn. She does not speak of it, but she does not need to. We all feel it. The Colosseum is a mouth that never closes. It swallows men whole, and it spits them back in pieces, sometimes alive, sometimes not. And we, the people of Rome, feed it willingly. We stand in line for the games. We buy bread with the emperor's stamp. We cry out in the heat of the afternoon until our throats burn. But in these first hours of morning, when the world is still half asleep, we admit to ourselves, quietly, only in the silence, that we are afraid. Afraid of what we will see. Afraid of what we have become. The streets grow busier as the faint light spreads. One by one, shutters creak open, voices join the air, and the city's hum begins again. It is never sudden. Rome wakes like a tide, creeping upward with each sound, each smell, each movement of the crowd. I find myself watching faces. The butcher's boy, his apron already dark with blood before the sun has even climbed. The old man who sells cheap garlands of wilted flowers, their fragrance barely masking the odour of the drain beside him. Women balancing jars on their heads, children tugging at hems, stray dogs nosing for scraps. These are the people of my Rome, the ones who live closest to the dirt. And yet, above all these small labours, the thought of the gladiators persists. No matter who you ask, no matter where you stand, they are there, in conversation, in rumour, in dreams. The wealthy may pretend they are creatures of entertainment alone, but we who walk these streets know they are something more dangerous. When I was a child, I remember peering through a gap in the wall near the barracks. My father had sent me to fetch oil, but my feet carried me toward the sound of clashing wood. I remember the rhythm of it, like thunder, crack, 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 and the way the men moved. They were not like the soldiers I sometimes glimpsed marching in the forum. These men fought with desperation, with hunger, with fury. Even in practice, there was something terrifying in the way their bodies collided. One man stumbled, fell, and for a moment I thought he would not rise, but the master's voice cut the air, sharp as a whip, and the man stood again, trembling, bruised, and ready to continue. I should not have been there. Children were kept away, and for good reason, but curiosity gnawed at me, and even now, as a grown man, it has never left me. I often wonder if the gladiators feel the same curiosity about us. If, in their locked cells, they imagine what it would be like to walk through the market, unnoticed, to spend a day free of chains. I cannot decide whether they are prisoners or performers, beasts or men. Rome itself cannot decide. We cheer them as heroes, yet remind ourselves they are slaves. We whisper their names with admiration, yet spit at their feet in the streets. I think that is why the fear lingers. For if they are truly men, flesh and blood like us, then what does it say about us, who demand their suffering for our pleasure? A cart rattles past me, wheels bouncing over cobblestones. Its driver flicks his reins impatiently, eager to deliver his load of amphorae before the crowd thickens. I step aside, pressing myself against the rough wall of a taberna, its door still shuttered. In the distance, the Colosseum looms like a ghost. Even in the grey of morning, it dominates the horizon, its arches stacked like open jaws, waiting. Some mornings I try not to look at it, but my eyes betray me. I find them drifting upward, tracing the curve of the stone, the scars where fires have blackened it, the nets and scaffolds clinging like vines. They say the amphitheatre can hold more souls than many towns in the provinces. Imagine that. An entire city of people gathered, not for bread, not for trade, but for blood. And so I listen, as I always do. I hear the whispers in the market. Who will fight today? Which Lannister has promised strong men? Whether the Emperor himself will attend? I hear bets already being made, coins changing hands long before the first trumpet has sounded, and in those voices I hear both excitement and dread. A woman near me speaks of her cousin, a servant in the house of a wealthy senator. She says he glimpsed one of the fighters through the bars of the training yard. Tall as a god, she insists, her hands shaping the air, with arms like marble pillars. She speaks of him as if he were a statue, not a man who sweats and bleeds. Her companion shushes her quickly, for such talk can turn dangerous. Adoration has a way of curdling into suspicion, and suspicion... The sun has begun its slow climb, but it does little to warm the stone underfoot. Shadows still cling to the narrow alleys, stretching long and thin like fingers reaching for the day. I pass beneath balconies where laundry hangs limp, catching faint breezes. The cloth is stained and patched, the colours faded, yet for a moment I catch myself staring as if they were banners. In this city, even the most ordinary sight seems touched by spectacle. Perhaps that is what Rome does to us, teaches us to see theatre everywhere, even in the mundane. At the well, a crowd has gathered. Women with jars balance their weight against hips, waiting their turn. Children chase each other through the dust, their laughter echoing off the walls. But between the laughter, I hear it again. The word gladiator. Always that word. Spoken in tones of awe, of fear, of envy. One boy, no older than 10, brags that he has seen them up close. His father, he claims, works as a porter for the arena. The boy swears he saw a man taller than 2 soldiers, with scars across his chest like claw marks from some beast. The children gasp, eyes wide, their imaginations filling in the rest. Did he slay a lion with his bare hands? Did he fight 5 men at once? The boy's voice drops to a whisper as he says the man smiled at him. just once, before turning away. The children stare as though this detail alone proves the tale true. I do not correct them. What would be the point? Let them have their stories. In a city where the powerful dine on silver and the poor fight over crusts of bread, the story can be worth more than a coin. But I see the way their eyes gleam, and it troubles me. Even the young are not spared the hunger for blood. They have not yet seen the sand stained red, yet they crave it all the same. I carry on, my steps leading me closer to the great structure that dominates our quarter. The Colosseum rises in the distance, its arches stacked like layers of a mountain carved by man. It is not beautiful to me, though many call it so. They speak of its grandeur, its might, its triumph. But when I look upon it, I see something hungrier, something alive. Its stone breathes with the chants of thousands, and even empty, it hums faintly with the memory of screams. I pause at a corner where vendors are setting up their stalls. The smell of olives, sharp and salty, mixes with the sweeter scent of figs. A woman arranges baskets of onions, brushing dirt from their skins with hands as rough as bark. She catches my gaze and shrugs. "The games will fill the streets today," she mutters. "Better to sell what we can before the crowd comes." Her voice holds no excitement, only weariness. For her, as for me, the games are not a festival but an interruption. They swell the city with strangers, thicken the air with sweat and wine, and leave the streets littered with filth. I nod in agreement and move on. Above us, the sky grows brighter, though a haze lingers, smoke from 100 hearths mingling into a grey veil. Rome never breathes clean. Even the air carries the weight of too many lives pressed together. As I near the amphitheatre, I notice more soldiers posted along the way. They stand tall, their armour catching the first rays of sun, their expressions fixed and cold. The presence of so many guards is no accident. They know what kind of men are kept inside those walls. Killers, rebels, deserters. If chains were to break, if walls were to crumble, the city would feel their wrath. Rome is not as invincible as she pretends. All it would take is a spark. I think of the men within, waking to their drill. Closer now, I can hear the barracks. The ludus sits just beyond a high wall, its gates heavy with iron, guarded like a treasury. I pass it often, for my errands lead me through this quarter, but I never linger long. Few dare to. The air around it feels different, charged, as though the men within breathe out their fury and it seeps through the cracks in the stone. From outside, the sounds are unmistakable. The smack of wood striking wood, the grunt of effort, the bark of commands. Sometimes there is laughter, harsh, short-lived, but more often it is the dull thud of bodies hitting the ground, followed by silence. Even without seeing, you know what happens inside. The training never ends. A group of children follows me, daring each other to draw nearer to the wall. One boy, braver than the rest, presses his ear against the stone. His face hardens, his mouth opens slightly, and then he leaps back, eyes wide. "I heard them," he says breathlessly. "They're fighting." The others giggle nervously, nudging each other forward, none willing to repeat his boldness. Their game is innocent, but beneath it lies something darker. The knowledge that the men inside are both spectacle and threat. I move on, unwilling to watch the game turn into mischief. It is not uncommon for curious youths to climb or pry, and when they are caught, punishment is swift. The Lanista tolerates no trespass, and the guards less still. Yet I too am tempted. I remember as a younger man, stealing a glance through a narrow slit in the wall. Just one. It was enough to last a lifetime. I saw men stripped to the waist, their bodies gleaming with sweat and oil, moving like animals, fast, precise, deadly. They struck each other with a rhythm that seemed both practiced and desperate, as though each blow carried not just skill but survival. Their faces, though, are what stayed with me. Not rage, not joy, but something colder. A hollow endurance, as though they had long since buried whatever they once were. That image has never left me. It returns now, unbidden, whenever I pass this way. And I wonder if they feel the weight of our eyes, even when unseen. Do they sense us walking past, carrying bread, carrying figs, carrying water, lives they no longer live? Perhaps that is punishment enough, to watch freedom walk by, day after day, while your own life is measured in bruises and roars. The city thickens here. More voices, more carts, more smells mingling. Smoke, dung, garlic, sweat. A procession of slaves shuffles past, carrying amphorae balanced on poles. Their faces are blank, their steps heavy. Rome is built on such backs, though we seldom admit it aloud, and as I watch them pass, I cannot help but see the reflection of the gladiators once again. Both chained, both owned, yet only one is paraded in front of thousands as though he were a god. I cross into a wider street where the morning sun finally reaches me. Its warmth is fleeting, barely softening the chill in my bones, but I welcome it. Ahead, the Colosseum looms in full, its arches stacked against the sky like the ribs of some enormous beast. Even now, empty and waiting, it dominates everything around it. The markets nearby swell with early trade, taverns prepare their wine, vendors hawk dried fruit and cheap trinkets to those who will soon file through the gates. I slow my pace, caught between dread and fascination. The amphitheatre has this effect on all of us. We resent its hunger, yet we cannot look away. It is the beating heart of Rome, and like all hearts, it both gives life and demands sacrifice. I hear a woman behind me sigh heavily. They say there will be 20 pairs today, she murmurs to her companion. Her voice carries the same tone as if she were speaking of the weather. Not excitement, not horror, only weary acceptance. 20 pairs, 40 men, and how many will leave breathing? The numbers pass through our ears like figures on a tally board, neat and bloodless. Only when the sand drinks their lives does the truth sink in. I grip my basket tighter, though it is still empty. Soon I will need to fill it, to trade, to carry on with the day. But in this moment, as the shadow of the Colosseum stretches over me, I cannot think of figs or onions or oil. I can only think of men, unseen, caged, waiting, and the roar that will soon rise from. The nearer I draw to the Colosseum, the quieter my own thoughts become. It is as though the stone itself demands silence, a hush that settles into your bones. The arches rise so high that the sky seems framed within them, broken into pieces by the weight of marble and brick. Even empty, the place hums. You can almost hear the faint echo of drums, the clash of trumpets, the cries of thousands carried in the memory of the walls. I pause by a fountain, pretending to wash my hands. In truth, I am only watching. Vendors scurry like ants, arranging their stalls. Soldiers shift in their armour, the morning light gleaming off bronze and steel. Beggars position themselves near the entrances, hoping for coins dropped by distracted hands. Everyone knows the games draw the wealthy, and where the wealthy walk, a beggar's bowl may grow heavy. And there, in the middle of it all, ordinary citizens like me. Some carry bread for their families, others argue over the price of olives, still others lean on staffs, their eyes already fixed upon the amphitheatre. It is as if the entire city tilts toward it, drawn like metal to a magnet. We live our lives around it, orbiting its hunger, never free of its pull. I sit on the fountain's edge, my basket at my feet, and listen. A group of men nearby speak in low tones, wagering on names I do not know. One boasts he has seen the Thracian fight before, swears the man moves like lightning, impossible to defeat. Another counters with tales of a Murmillo, broad-shouldered and cruel, whose shield is like a wall of iron. They argue not with malice, but with excitement, as though debating horses or dice. To them, these men are pieces in a game, their fates no heavier than counters on a board. I envy them in a way, to speak so lightly of blood, to think of the sand as entertainment, no different than a race or a play. But I cannot. I have seen the faces after the crowd disperses, when the sand is raked and the bodies carried away. I have seen the stains that water cannot wash clean, and I know that behind every name spoken so carelessly is a man who breathes, who aches, who perhaps prays to live another day. A sudden shout startles me. A cart has overturned nearby, spilling baskets of fruit across the stones. Children dart forward, snatching apples before the driver can stop them. He curses, waving his arms, but the damage is done. The fruit rolls into the gutter, bruised and dirty. I watch the scene unfold, chaotic and familiar, and for a moment I'm reminded of the arena itself. The rush, the scramble, the desperation for something that may not last. Even here, on the street, Rome is always performing. I lift my basket, deciding at last to fill it. A woman sells dates nearby, and I purchase a small bundle, tucking them carefully inside. They will fetch a fair trade later if the crowd grows hungry. The thought makes me uneasy. To profit even a little from the same appetite that demands blood, is it any different from cheering in the stands? Yet I do it all the same. Survival makes hypocrites of us all. The sun climbs higher. Its light spills fully over the Colosseum now, gilding the stone in a glow that makes it seem almost divine. Pilgrims from distant provinces gaze upon it with wonder, their faces awestruck. To them it is proof of Rome's greatness, a temple of power and spectacle. To me it is only a reminder of how small we are, how easily swept into the tide of voices that will soon thunder within those walls. I turn away at last, my basket heavy enough, my mind heavier still. The day stretches before me, and though I will go about my trade, though I will haggle and carry and eat, beneath it all I will feel the weight of what waits. The gladiators are awake now, their sweat already soaking the sand of their yard, their bodies prepared for the trial ahead. And we, the people, are awake too, walking steadily toward the inevitable. Dawn has passed, the city lives, and the shadow of the arena has lengthened once more. It is a strange thing, to live beside men you will never truly meet. The gladiators are our neighbours in a way, their barracks only a street or two from where I walk, their training yard echoing into our homes, yet they remain hidden, sealed behind walls higher than a house, as if Rome wishes to keep them close and distant all at once. I often wonder what life is like inside. I imagine the barracks as a world of iron and dust, where the sun barely touches the ground and every breath is thick with sweat. When the wind shifts, I sometimes catch the faint smell of oil, leather and smoke drifting over the walls. It clings to the senses, sharp and heavy. Some nights, if the city is quiet, I hear the ring of hammer on metal, armour being repaired, swords sharpened for the next contest. There are those who say the gladiators live better than common men, fed on meat and wine, cared for by physicians. And perhaps it is true. But what good is meat when it fattens you only for the slaughter? What joy is there in wine if it dulls the memory of your chains? We measure a man's life by freedom, not by fullness of his stomach. Still, I think of them when I wake to my own bread, coarse and dry. Somewhere, perhaps at that very moment, a gladiator eats too, but his meal is weighed by the hand of a lanista, his master. Each bite he takes is calculated, not for his pleasure, but for the spectacle he must become. I once met a man who delivered supplies to the ludus. He carried sacks of barley, oil and beans through the great gates, though he never saw the men who would consume them. He told me the barracks were divided into cells, narrow as coffins, with straw pallets where the fighters slept. Some were chained at night, especially the new ones, lest they try to flee. Imagine that. To close your eyes each evening with iron clasped around your ankle, knowing the key is kept in another man's hand. He said, too, that the walls of the cells were etched with marks, not drawings but scratches, tallies perhaps, made by hands desperate to count the days. I do not know if the story is true, but it lingers with me. Scratches in stone, small, stubborn proof that a man wished to be remembered, even by himself. Sometimes, when passing by, I hear the sound of voices lifted in song. Not the sweet music of taverns, nor the hymns sung in temples, but something rougher, harsher. A chant, perhaps, to keep rhythm as they train. Or maybe a song from faraway lands, carried into Rome by captives who never expected to remain. It makes me pause, that sound. A reminder that within those walls are men from every corner of the empire. Gauls, Thracians, Africans, Syrians, even Romans who fell too low. Bound together not by choice, but by the cruel hand of fate. I remember once, long ago, standing in the marketplace when a group of recruits was marched through the streets. They were not yet gladiators, only condemned men, chained in pairs. Some walked with heads bowed, some cursed loudly, and a few stared straight ahead, faces carved from stone. The crowd jeered, as crowds do, but I noticed one boy, no older than 16, who shuffled with his wrists bound. His eyes darted everywhere, wide with fear, like a bird trapped in a net. I often think of him when I pass the ludus. Did he survive his first fight? Did he grow into a hardened killer, or did the sand drink his life in a single afternoon? Rome swallows men like him without a thought, and so the barracks remain for me a place of questions more than answers. A place of shadows, where voices rise and steel strikes, but faces remain unseen. Yet even hidden, they shape the life of the city. For when the gates open, and those men are led into the Colosseum, the whole world seems to watch. And we, those of us outside the walls, cannot escape the knowledge that they sleep, eat, and breathe so near, waiting for the hour when chains turn to spectacle. The rhythm of the barracks is as steady as the tolling of a bell. Even without seeing the men inside, one can feel the hours by their sounds. At dawn, when I rise to fetch water, the first clatter begins, buckets being filled, voices rising as guards bark orders, the creak of gates unbolted. By mid-morning, the grunts of training carry over the walls, the crack of wooden weapons striking shields echoing like drumbeats. At noon, silence falls, heavy and sudden, broken only by the faint rattle of chains or the dull scrape of bowls. Then, in the late afternoon, the noise swells again, sharper now, as if the very air is bruised by the rhythm of combat. I sometimes stop in the street when the sounds are clearest. If I close my eyes, I can almost see it. The fighters circling, feet sliding in sand, wooden swords whipping through the air, the lanista or his trainers shouting, pushing them harder, always harder. Perhaps a man stumbles and another drives him to the ground, earning jeers or praise. Perhaps blood even then, for a misstep with a blunted edge still tears skin, still leaves its mark. The walls cannot hide that truth. At times I hear laughter. Not joyous laughter, but the rough, barking kind that men share when there is little else to do. It unsettles me more than the shouts of pain. To laugh in such a place, is it defiance or resignation? Do they laugh at us, the free, who scurry outside with our baskets and debts, believing ourselves untouchable? Or is it the laughter of men who know tomorrow is never promised, and so mock fate while they can? The barracks has its own market of sorts. Traders arrive with carts of food, wood, oil and herbs. They are not permitted inside, their goods are taken at the gate, counted and measured. But I watch them come and go. The lanista keeps the purse tight, yet he is known to pay promptly. A man who supplies gladiators prospers, though many whisper it is cursed coin. I cannot decide myself. When hunger gnaws, no coin feels cursed. There is a physician attached to the ludus, a Greek, so I've been told. His house is near mine, though he rarely speaks to neighbours. A tall, quiet man, always carrying satchels of herbs, cloth and sharpened knives. I have seen him return at night, weary, his hands stained. Some say he is skilled enough to keep men breathing when any other would have let them die. Others call him cruel, saying he patches wounds only to send a man back into the sand sooner. Both may be true. Rome admires skill, not mercy. From time to time a gladiator dies not in the arena but in the barracks. Illness, injury, despair. These claim men as surely as the sword. When that happens, the body is carried out at night, covered in rough cloth. The slaves who bear it move quickly, as though hoping no one will see. But we see. We always see. Death within those walls is no less final than death before the crowds, only quieter, swallowed by stone instead of thunder. And yet, life continues there. They eat, they drink, they sleep. I imagine them waking in the half-light, stretching sore limbs, murmuring in a dozen tongues. Some may whisper prayers to gods far from Rome, others perhaps to none at all. They share bread, they share wine, they share silence. Chains bind their bodies, but proximity binds their fates. Even enemies in the arena must have once sat side by side at those narrow tables. The thought chills me. To eat with a man one day and face his blade the next. Children in the street sometimes play at being gladiators. They take sticks for swords, broken lids for shields, and chase one another with shrill cries. Their mothers scold them, pulling them back, But the game repeats itself day after day. The Colosseum feeds their dreams, and the barracks provides the echo. I watch them play, and I wonder, do they understand the truth of the game they mimic? Or is that knowledge only for those of us who lie awake at night, hearing the hammer on steel? The Lannister himself is a figure of mystery to us. His name is spoken with equal parts respect and disdain. A businessman, nothing more, yet his business is men. Some say he treats his fighters well, for their bodies are his investment. Others claim he is cruel, driving them until their bones crack. I cannot know which is true, but when he passes through the streets, he does so with the air of a man untouchable. His purse is heavy, his guards loyal, and behind him trails the fear of what he commands. Once I saw him inspecting recruits at the gate. A slave had stumbled under the weight of a bundle, and the Lannister struck him across the face with a rod. The man fell, blood spraying, but the Lannister did not pause. He moved on as though swatting a fly. I remember the stillness of the others standing there, chained in pairs. Not one flinched, not one spoke. Silence was their only shield. That silence haunts me more than the blow itself. The barracks, though hidden, reminds us daily of Rome's power. The walls are not just stone, they are a mirror. They show us who we are, and who we could become, should fortune turn. A gambler who falls into debt, a soldier who deserts, a slave who displeases his master. Any of these may find himself behind those walls, waiting to fight for the city's amusement. Perhaps that is why we watch so intently, why the games draw us like moths to flame. To see others fall is to believe, however briefly, that we are safe. But we are not safe, not truly. Rome feeds on men, and the barracks is its storehouse. Today it is them. Tomorrow it could be me. The days of Rome are measured not only by the rising of the sun or the tolling of bells, but by the meals we share, the bread we break, the hunger we endure. Even the strongest legions march on their stomachs, and the same is true for those who fight in the sand. A man may lift a sword with skill, but without food, without strength, his body betrays him. In my own home, mornings begin with a crust of bread, coarse, dark, heavy with barley. It fills the belly, though it does little for the tongue. Children chew it slowly, dunking it in watered wine if we are lucky, or softening it in broth if the day has been kind. The poor live on barley, the rich on wheat. This is the order of things, as fixed as the stars. The gladiators too live by barley. I have heard them called hordearii, barley men, for their diet is thick with it. Some in the city laugh at this, mocking them as beasts fattened for slaughter, but I've watched barley sprout in the fields outside Rome, its stalks stubborn and tall, thriving where wheat grows thin. There is strength in barley, rough though it may be. Perhaps the Lannister knows this. Perhaps that is why the men inside those walls are made to eat it in such measure. When the wind blows from the south, carrying smells from the barracks' kitchens, I catch it. Smoke from boiling pots, the sharp tang of beans and lentils, the faint sweetness of dried figs. Their food is plain, yet plentiful, more than mine sometimes. And I confess, when hunger grips me, when the price of wheat climbs too high in the forum, I envy them, even as I pity them. Imagine that, envying the chained. Rome is cruel, but hunger is crueler still. I know a vendor who once delivered amphorae of cheap wine to the ludus. He said the men drank it watered down, not for pleasure but for need. Wine softens the ache in the muscles, numbs the bite of pain. Yet too much weakens the body, and so it is given sparingly, measured like medicine. Some fighters, he told me, hoarded theirs, trading sips of wine for favours or small mercies. In such a world, even a swallow from a clay cup may be more precious than gold. What fascinates me most is the ritual of eating. Not the food itself, but the way it is consumed. In taverns, men raise cups loudly, toast to victories, boast and argue. But in the barracks, the meal is quiet. Bowls are set, portions equal, the men sit shoulder to shoulder. There is no chatter, no laughter, only the sound of chewing, of spoons scraping wood. Each man eats knowing the one beside him may be his foe tomorrow. How does a man swallow in such silence? How does he not choke on dread? I have shared bread with neighbours, with strangers even, for to break bread together is to forge a bond. But what bond can be forged when every bite is a reminder that bonds mean nothing in the sand? Perhaps the gladiators know something we do not. Perhaps they eat not for pleasure, not for fellowship, but for survival alone. To them, food is no gift, it is a weapon. The fuel that keeps the arm strong, the heart beating, the legs steady when the crowd roars for blood. And so I think often of this. The barley, the beans, the bitter wine, the food of men who live each day beneath the shadow of death. It is not a feast but a sentence, not a blessing but a bargain. For every mouthful swallowed, another day of struggle awaits. When I pass the grain stalls in the forum, I sometimes pause to watch the crowd. Housewives with purses of bronze, slaves with lists from their masters, beggars hoping for scraps. The noise is endless, shouting, haggling, cursing, and yet beneath it all lies the same hunger, shared by rich and poor alike. Rome feeds on grain, as surely as the Colosseum feeds on flesh. Without bread, riots erupt. Without bread, Rome itself falters. It is strange to think that the same sacks of barley I see heaped in the market may find their way into the bellies of gladiators. The same beans I buy for stew may thicken the muscles of a man destined to fall before the emperor's gaze. Our lives are bound together through grain, though we walk such different roads. I remember once, during a shortage, when the grain ships were delayed by storms, the price of wheat soared and families lined the streets begging for their ration of barley. Fights broke out in the forum, soldiers had to intervene. Yet the ludus did not go hungry. Their supply was guarded, their stores kept full. The city will starve before the games are starved. That is Rome's truth. Bread for the people, yes, but blood above all. The morning of a spectacle is unlike any other. Even if I wished to sleep longer, I could not. The city itself shakes awake earlier than usual, restless with anticipation. Bakers pull loaves from their ovens before the sun has cleared the rooftops. Merchants set up their stalls with hurried hands, eager to profit from the crowd. The air carries the smells of smoke, yeast, and sweat, the scent of a city bracing itself for hunger, thirst, and blood. And yet, beyond the gates of the ludus, the morning takes on a different weight. I cannot see inside, but I imagine it clearly, piece by piece, as though the walls were made of glass. There is order to their day, and on mornings like these, order is sharpened to ritual. The fighters rise early, stirred by guards, some perhaps even before dawn. They eat, barley porridge thickened with beans, bread coarse but filling, a swallow of watered wine. Their bodies are fed not for pleasure but for endurance, the slow-building fire that will sustain them when the sun burns overhead and the crowd screams for more. After the meal, silence. I imagine the barracks heavy with thought. Some men may sharpen their wooden practice swords or stretch stiff muscles. Others may sit in prayer, lips moving in whispers to gods Roman and foreign alike. I have heard of gladiators who carry small charms, tokens tied to home, a smooth stone, a strip of cloth, a carving no bigger than a thumb. What comfort can such things bring when death waits only hours away? Perhaps enough. Perhaps it is not the object that matters, but the memory it carries. I remember once passing near the gates when they were opened for a delivery. The smell that drifted out was unlike anything else. Sweat, iron, smoke, and fear, all mingled together into something heavy. And yet, beneath it, I caught another scent. Oil. The men had been rubbing it into their skin, slicking their bodies as part of their preparation. Not vanity, no, but protection. The oil kept muscles warm, made wounds less easy to see, gave the flesh a sheen under the bright sun. A strange kind of armour, not of iron, but of glisten and ritual. I imagine their prayers most often. In the temples, citizens like me pray for harvest, for health, for the safety of our children. The gladiators pray for breath, just one more day, one more hour. A few perhaps pray for a clean death, quick and without shame. The priests of Rome speak of honour, of glory, of the gods watching proudly as men fight. But I have seen the faces of gladiators led into the arena. They are not men thinking of gods, they are men thinking of survival. Some stare into the crowd with defiance, others look only at the sand. Their prayers, whatever they may be, have already been spoken in the stillness of the barracks. Before they leave, I am told, they draw lots, a ritual meant to divide who fights and who waits. The lanista oversees, though chance is only part of it. Some men are favoured, held back for greater spectacles. Others are pushed forward, fodder for the day. Fate and coin mingle freely in Rome. Then comes the arming. I can picture it, slaves carrying armour piece by piece, strapping it onto the fighters with practiced hands. The creak of leather, the clink of bronze, the rasp of buckles pulled tight. A Murmelo's helmet, heavy and enclosing, swallowing his face in steel. A Retiarius's net, folded and ready, his trident gleaming. Each man clothed not in his own will, but in the role Rome has assigned him. And there, in the final moments before the gates open, I imagine silence again. The silence of men waiting. The silence of breath caught between heartbeats. The silence of those who know they are walking into thunder. The streets outside the Ludus swell with people by then. Children hoist themselves on ledges, trying to glimpse a figure through the iron bars. Vendors call out their wares: nuts, bread, watered wine, trinkets carved in the shape of helmets or swords. The whole city becomes an extension of the ritual. The Colosseum may hold the games, but Rome itself holds the breath beforehand. I walk among them, pretending to busy myself with errands. In truth, I am drawn by the same pull as everyone else. The knowledge that behind those gates men are readying themselves for death. There is something shameful in the curiosity, and yet irresistible. Then, at last, the moment arrives. The gates creak open, the guards shout, and the gladiators march out in chains or in pairs, surrounded by escorts. Their steps are steady, their faces unreadable. Some stare straight ahead, others glance briefly at the sky as though memorizing it. The crowd cheers, jeers, tosses insults, coins, prayers. And I, standing at the edge, can only watch as the ritual ends and the procession begins. The men who woke in darkness, who ate barley and beans, who whispered prayers into the still air of their cells, they now walk toward the place where Rome will devour them. This too is a ritual, not of gods, not of priests, but of power. Rome's power. The Colosseum hungers and the city feeds it again and again. There is a sound in Rome that no other city knows, a sound so vast it shakes the air like thunder. It is not the cry of war, nor the chant of soldiers, nor even the hymns lifted to the gods. It is the roar of the Colosseum, the roar of 50,000 throats joined as one, devouring silence, devouring thought. I have felt it in my chest, in my bones. You do not simply hear the crowd, you are swallowed by it. Even those of us who do not enter the amphitheatre cannot escape it. The sound spills over the walls, pours through the streets, climbs the hills. When the games begin, all of Rome quivers. The morning of a spectacle, the city floods toward the Colosseum. Families, beggars, nobles, foreigners, the whole of Rome streams through the gates as if drawn by the same invisible cord. The rich enter first, carried in litters, their seats reserved in the shaded tiers. Senators and priests take their places of honour. Merchants, artisans, slaves, all climb higher, pressed together, sweat mingling with dust. Even those too poor to gain entry linger outside, pressing their ears against the stone, eager for the echo of the spectacle. I walk with them sometimes, though my seat is the ground near the outer wall. I do not often enter. The tickets are free, yes, scattered like alms to the people. But the crush of the crowd, the heat, the stink of bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, it is too much. And yet to sit outside is no escape. The sound reaches you all the same, rushing out of the arches like a tide. At first the noise is restless, like a sea before a storm. Children cry, vendors shout, men argue over wages. Then, as the trumpet blares and the gates open, the sound swells, unites, becomes one body. 50,000 voices gasping, cheering, jeering. 50,000 hearts beating to the same rhythm. The crowd becomes its own creature, vast and ravenous, demanding to be fed. Inside, I imagine the gladiators standing in formation, saluting the emperor or his proxy. Some speak the words I have heard repeated in the taverns: Ave Caesar, morituri te salutant. Hail Caesar, those who are about to die salute you. Not all say it, but Rome insists they do. The truth matters less than the tale, and the crowd drinks it in. Their roar rises, shakes the very stone, rolls across the city like a storm. It is not joy alone, nor cruelty alone. It is something deeper, a hunger that lives in us all. I have asked myself many times why we gather. Why do men and women, free and slave alike, press into the Colosseum until they can scarcely breathe? Why do we crave the sight of men tearing one another apart? Some say it is the gift of the emperors, bread and games, a way to keep us docile, to drown our grievances in spectacle. There is truth in this. A hungry belly riots, a full belly, dazzled by blood, does not. But I think it is more than politics. The roar of the crowd is older, deeper than Rome itself. Perhaps it is in our nature, this hunger for struggle. The farmers who break their backs in the fields, the soldiers who march on distant roads, the mothers who endure childbirth, all of us fight in one way or another. In the arena, we see that struggle made flesh. A man falls, another rises. A man bleeds, another lives. The sand becomes a mirror of our own lives, stripped of all pretense. And yet, the cruelty cannot be denied. I have seen men laugh as blood sprays across the arena floor. I have seen women clap as a fallen fighter is struck again and again. I have seen children cheer louder for death than for mercy. The roar teaches us something, perhaps something we would rather not learn, that within us all is a beast, waiting only for permission to howl. On the days of games, that beast is loosed. The Colosseum becomes its cage, and the roar its cry. Outside, I sit on a low wall and close my eyes. I do not need to see to know what is happening. The sounds tell the story. The cheer that bursts suddenly, a gate opening. The sharp gasp, a man struck. The drawn-out roar, blood spilled, a fighter falling. Each sound carries an image, clear as any sight. Beside me, others listen as well. A beggar clutches his bowl, muttering predictions to those who toss him coins. A child hops from foot to foot, imitating the clash he imagines inside. A woman weeps softly, though whether for pity or memory, I cannot know. We are all tied to the same roar, even out here in the dust. Then comes the moment I dread most. A long pause, silence falling heavy as stone. The crowd holds its breath. Inside, a man lies wounded, waiting for the verdict. Will he be spared or condemned? The emperor's hand rises and the crowd cries out, thumb turned this way or that. The decision is never truly his. It belongs to the people, to the roar that swells until the air itself seems to bend. When mercy is given, the cheer is bright, sharp, brief. When death is chosen, the sound is deeper, heavier, more lasting. It is not the shout of relief, but of hunger satisfied. I feel it in my bones, even here beyond the gates. A life ends, and the crowd rejoices. Rome roars, and the world listens. I bow my head then, clutching my basket tighter, wishing the sound would fade. But it never does. The roar lingers long after the game is done, echoing in the mind, the heart, the soul. This is Rome. Bread for the belly, blood for the crowd. And above all, the roar that binds us all together. In shame, in hunger, in silence. The arena floor is not marble, nor stone, nor polished wood. It is sand. Always sand. Fine grains, golden in the morning sun, reddened by evening with what has been spilled. The Romans call it arena, the very word that gives the amphitheatre its name. Sand swallows blood. Sand swallows sweat. Sand swallows cries when a face is pressed into it. And yet for all it swallows, it never forgets. You can smell it when the gates open, the mingled scent of iron, salt and dust. No matter how they rake it smooth between bouts, the sand remembers. I've never walked upon that floor. Only gladiators, beasts and executioners know its true feel beneath their feet. But I have stood close enough to watch when the gates swing wide, and in those moments I imagine. What must it be to step from the cool darkness of the waiting pen into that blinding light? To feel the heat of 50,000 eyes upon your skin? To stand upon the sand, sword in hand, knowing you may leave only on a litter, or not at all? Some say the sand is holy. It drinks the blood of men and beasts, becoming an altar of sacrifice. Others say it is cursed, poisoned by centuries of death. I think it is both. When I pass the Colosseum on the day after games, I see carts hauling away the clumped sand, stained dark as wine. New sand is poured in, fresh and clean, as if Rome herself wishes to wash her hands. But the memory lingers, always. The sword. Ah, how Rome reveres the sword. In the hands of a soldier it builds empires. In the hands of a gladiator it entertains them. A curious thing, is it not? The same blade that wins provinces across the sea wins applause at home. I have seen the gladiators train, not in secret but in the open yards near the ludus. The clang of metal rings across the stones at dawn, long before most of us stir from our beds. Their wooden practice swords strike with a rhythm steady as hammers, overseen by gruff trainers who bark corrections in coarse Latin. Some of these men were once soldiers, I hear, hardened veterans turned instructors. Others are freedmen, their fortunes tied to the blood of those they coach. I cannot tell which are harsher, those who know war or those who know only the games. Both drive their pupils to exhaustion. Both strike them down if they falter. And yet, within the clash there is art. I have seen a pair of young fighters move so swiftly that the eye could scarcely follow. Blades flashed, shields lifted, bodies twisted and turned. It was like watching dancers, though their steps were edged in steel. The trainers called out forms: thrust, parry, sidestep, feint, and the men obeyed, sweat flying from their brows. This too is Rome, death shaped into beauty. But the sword is more than weapon, it is a test. In the arena, the blade speaks louder than any man. A slave may rise to glory with steel in his hand. A free man may fall to scorn if his grip falters. The sword levels all, if only for a moment. I have heard it said that some gladiators love their weapons, naming them, stroking them like companions. Others despise them, seeing only the chains they represent. For the sword is freedom, and yet bondage too. It may lift a man to fame, but only if he risks his life with every stroke. The crowd loves the clash of steel most of all. When two men meet blade to blade, the sound rings up into the seats, sharp and clear. Children leap to their feet, merchants pause in their counting. Even the nobles, so often bored, lean forward to watch. The sword is honest, it does not deceive. A strike lands, or it does not. A man lives, or he dies. And beneath it all, the sand drinks, quiet, patient, eternal. Each drop of blood darkens it, each broken tooth, each fragment of shattered armour. The sand is the record keeper, the sword is the scribe. Together they write the history of Rome, one life at a time. Sometimes when I dream, I hear it, the scrape of sandal on sand, the hiss of steel through air. I dream that I, too, stand there, sword in hand. The crowd roars, the sun blinds. My breath catches in my throat. The sand shifts beneath my feet, treacherous, alive. In that moment I know two things. First, that every step, every heartbeat is borrowed. Second, that the sword in my hand is not mine. It belongs to Rome, as do I. I awake then, sweating, clutching nothing but my blanket. The sound fades, but the feeling lingers. I am not a gladiator. I am no fighter. I am only a man who sells fruit, who counts coins, who tries to live quietly. And yet Rome does not let us forget. The sand, the sword, the roar, they seep into us, into our bones, into our dreams. The gladiators fight in the arena, but in some way we all fight. The sand is under all our feet. The sword is always at our throats. If the Colosseum is Rome's stage, then the ludus, the gladiator school, is her hidden workshop. Few of us common folk have stepped inside its walls, and fewer still would wish to. Yet its presence hangs over the neighbourhood like a shadow. I pass by often, carrying my basket of figs, and I hear the sounds that escape the gates. The bark of orders, the clash of wooden swords, the groans of men driven past exhaustion. The Ludus Magnus, they call it, the great school, built to feed the Colosseum. From the outside it is a fortress of stone, plain and unadorned, set with narrow windows and high walls. But within I imagine a world of discipline and dread. Barracks lined with hard cots, training yards echoing with drills, kitchens that dole out simple meals to keep bodies strong. Some say the men inside are slaves, bought and branded, owned by their lanista, the trainer who profits from their blood. Others say some enter by choice, desperate free men, debtors, even former soldiers who prefer the arena to beggary. Whatever their path, once inside, all are the same. Property. their lives measured in coin, their worth tested in combat. And yet, whispers travel. Rome is a city of ears, and even the thickest wall cannot keep rumour from seeping out. We who linger near the ludus hear fragments carried on the air, the groan of a wounded man, the laughter of comrades sharing stale bread, the low song of homesick foreigners who train under Rome's lash. I sometimes pause at the gate, pretending to adjust my basket, listening. The voices within are muffled, but to me they sound like the voices of ghosts. There are stories, always stories. One tells of a Thracian fighter who challenged his trainer, beating him in a mock duel, and was flogged until his back was raw. Another of a Gaul who escaped the walls, only to be hunted down and paraded back in chains for all to see. The ludus is both cradle and prison. It raises men into weapons, but it holds them fast. And yet, not all whispers are grim. Some speak of bonds formed inside, friendships born of sweat and struggle. I have heard that gladiators share their bread, protect the weaker, laugh together in the evenings. In the yard, their voices rise in argument, jest, even song. Perhaps it is the way of men in chains, to find comfort in one another, to hold back despair with laughter. There is also talk of rivalry, of grudges carried into the arena, a shove in training, an insult over food, a clash of pride. These seeds sprout in blood when the two are matched before the crowd. The audience believes the battles are fate, but we who listen to whispers know they are often more personal. When I hear these tales, I think of the men themselves. Not heroes, not villains, just men. Each with a mother, perhaps a wife, perhaps children far away. Each with a name, though Rome forgets most of them. The ludus swallows their identities, forging them into titles. The murmillo, the retiarius, the secutor, masks for men who once had lives. Once, while I lingered near the school, I saw a small window high upon the wall. Behind it, a face appeared, just for a breath, then gone. It was a young man, his hair cropped short, his cheeks still smooth. His eyes met mine, wide, startled, almost pleading. Then a shout rang out from within and he vanished. I walked home that night with the image burning in my mind. Who was he? A slave stolen from some far province? A farmer who sold himself for debt? A prisoner of war torn from his homeland? Whoever he was no longer his own. He belonged to the ludus, to Rome, to the roar of the crowd. And yet that brief glance reminded me that these are not faceless fighters, but men caught between fear and survival. Behind the armour and the sand there are hearts that beat, eyes that search, lips that whisper prayers. The city forgets this. Rome does not see men. Rome sees entertainment. But if you pause, if you listen at the war, if you catch a fleeting look through a barred window, you cannot help but remember. At night, when the torches burn low and the streets grow quiet, the ludus still hums with life. I have heard it while lying awake in my room, the faint ring of steel, the murmur of voices carried on the wind. I imagine the men unable to sleep, sharpening their blades, speaking softly of home. Perhaps they tell stories of mothers and wives, of rivers and fields left behind. Perhaps they speak of fear, though in whispers so low that only the stone hears. Perhaps they dream aloud of freedom, a dream Rome dangles before them like a baited hook, the wooden sword of release promised to those who endure. These whispers are fragile, easily lost in the roar of day. Yet to me they are more real than the spectacles themselves, for in them I hear the truth. The gladiator is not only fighter, nor slave, nor hero. He is man, and man, no matter how bound, will always whisper of what lies beyond his chains.
In Rome, hunger is as common as dust. It clings to the skin, seeps into the bones. I have seen men fight over a crust of bread in the alleyways. Women water down their porridge so their children's bellies feel less empty. The city is vast, but its stomach is never full. And so, the emperors feed us, not with generosity, but with necessity. Panem et circenses, bread and circuses. The phrase drifts through the taverns like smoke. They know what keeps us quiet. Food for the belly, spectacle for the eyes. A people distracted will not rise. A people fed will not rebel. The grain ships arrive in Ostia, their sails fat with wind, their hulls groaning with wheat from Africa, from Egypt. Without them, we would starve. With them, we survive, barely. The grain is measured, ground, baked, handed out in rations that keep us alive, but never content. Each citizen queuing for bread becomes another voice in the emperor's ledger. Each loaf is a coin of loyalty. I have stood in those lines, shoulder to shoulder with laborers and beggars alike, the smell of fresh bread taunting us as the sun climbed higher. Some push, some curse, some faint from waiting. And when at last the bread is given, warm and rough in the hand, we clutch it as though it were treasure. It is treasure of a kind, for in Rome, bread is survival. But bread alone does not keep a city of millions at peace. No. We hunger also for escape, for distraction from the grind of life. And so, the Colosseum answers. The grain feeds our bodies. The blood feeds our spirits. It is a bargain we do not question, though perhaps we should. For each loaf I receive, another man sheds blood. Each ration I swallow is sweetened, perhaps, by the cries of those who fight. Rome's greatness is built not only on stone and law, but on the bodies of men offered for our amusement. I have sat with my bread in hand outside the arena walls, listening as the games unfold within. The crust crumbles in my mouth, the taste dry and plain. And then, from beyond the arches, the roar rises. A man has fallen, another has triumphed. Bread in one hand, blood in the ear. It is as though Rome has woven the two together, so that one cannot exist without the other. Children know this, though they do not speak it. They clutch their crusts, wide-eyed, while their fathers cheer for death. Women nibble at their loaves as they gossip about gladiators' names, their fates sealed in the sand. The poorest of us, who depend on the dole, know too well that the bread is given not from kindness but from calculation. Yet we eat it all the same. Hunger silences questions. There are days when the line at the grain dole is longer than the patience of the guards. A shove, a word too loud, and suddenly fists fly. Bread becomes the spark for violence, even among those who have nothing else. I have seen men beaten half to death for cutting a head, women trampled as the crowd surged. Rome gives, yes, but always at a price. And yet, the memory of hunger is sharper than the memory of bruises. Once the loaf is in hand, the pain is forgotten. Once the games begin, the crowd forgets the press of the dole. We are simple, we Romans. Or perhaps we are made to be simple. The empire keeps us this way, full enough not to riot, entertained enough not to question. Sometimes in the quiet of night I wonder if this bargain is fair. Bread fills the stomach, but it does not nourish the soul. Blood entertains the eye, but it leaves the heart uneasy. Still, I rise with the dawn, I queue for my ration, I sit outside the arena. I play my part, as do we all. There is a saying, Rome cannot live without bread and blood. I think it is true. The grain feeds the body of the city. The games feed its spirit. Remove either, and the whole might crumble. The emperors know this well. That is why the grain ships sail, why the Colosseum stands tall, why the roar never ceases. Our days measured by what we eat, our evenings by what we see. It is a cycle as endless as the Tiber's flow. I sometimes dream of a Rome without the games, a Rome where bread alone suffices. But in those dreams the city feels hollow, the streets strangely silent. For better or worse, blood is the music of our days, as essential as water, as air. Bread and blood. This is the bargain Rome offers. We accept it, for we must. To refuse would be to starve. To protest would be to vanish beneath the roar. And so we chew our crusts. We wipe the crumbs from our lips. And we listen as another man's blood darkens the sand. That is Rome, a city that feeds on both the loaf and the life. When the games begin, the Colosseum becomes more than an arena. It becomes a mirror of Rome itself. To sit among the crowd, or even to stand outside and watch the faces passing through the arches, is to glimpse the whole empire gathered in one place. I have seen them all, the rich in their silks, perfumed and aloof, the poor in patched tunics, clutching their free tickets like prized coins, soldiers home from campaign, scarred and restless, slaves trailing behind their masters, eyes lowered yet flickering with stolen glances. The Colosseum does not divide us by wealth or station. Within those walls, we are all part of the same roar. Still, the seats tell their own story. Closest to the arena sit the senators and the equestrians, their togas spotless, their sandals polished. They watch with practiced calm, though I see their lips twitch when blood sprays. Above them sit the merchants and tradesmen, their voices loud, their wagers louder. Higher still, the common folk crowd the benches, pressed shoulder to shoulder, their sweat mingling, their cheers raw and unrestrained. At the very top, beneath the open sky, sit the women, the foreigners, the slaves, the lowest tier, but no less hungry for spectacle. From the sand, I imagine the fighters must look up and see a mountain of faces, tier upon tier, all leaning forward, all demanding, all devouring with their eyes. To face a man with sword in hand is one terror. To face the judgment of 50,000 is another. Sometimes I watch the crowd more closely than the games themselves. There is a strange theater in their reactions, as if each face tells its own story. A noble woman leans forward, her veil slipping, her lips parted not in horror but in fascination. Perhaps she whispers the name of her favored gladiator, as others whisper the names of lovers. Beside her, her husband scowls, feigning disinterest, though his hand tightens on the arm of his seat when the swords clash. A butcher, his apron still stained from morning work, leaps to his feet, shouting for blood as though he were still among his carcasses. A child beside him claps with delight, not yet knowing the weight of what he sees. An old veteran sits quietly, arms folded, his face unreadable. He has seen real war, I think, and the theater of death does not stir him. Perhaps it wearies him, or perhaps he sees ghosts where others see entertainment. I have seen beggars spend their last coin on wagers, faces alight with hope, only to slump when fortune turns. I have seen slaves forget themselves, shouting so loudly their masters cuff them to silence. In the crowd, masks fall away. Hunger, lust, rage, pity, all are laid bare. And then there are the gamblers. Rome is a city addicted to chance, and the Colosseum is her greatest gaming house. Before the bouts begin, men argue over odds, shouting names, boasting of their foresight. Coins clink as wagers are laid, fortunes made and lost in the time it takes for two blades to cross. I have seen men weep with joy at a lucky win, tossing bread to beggars in sudden generosity. I have seen others sink to their knees, ruined, cursing the gods and the fighters alike. The sand does not only drink blood, it drinks silver, copper, gold, flowing from hand to hand as surely as lifeblood flows from vein to earth. The crowd loves a favorite, but it loves an underdog more. When a fighter once scorned rises to victory, the cheer is louder than thunder. Rome adores the twist of fate, the sudden turn, the story no one expected. And so wagers are not only about money, they are about hope, about the fantasy that even the lowliest may rise. Perhaps that is why I linger in the crowd, though I place no bets. To see Rome laid bare in its hunger, its cruelty, its hope. This is its own kind of spectacle. Yet for all the noise, for all the sweat and roar, I sometimes catch a different sight. A lone face, still amid the storm. A woman clutching her child, eyes distant, lips pressed tight. A young man staring not at the fight, but at the emperor's box, his expression unreadable. A slave standing silently behind his master, his gaze fixed on the sand, though no one notices. It is in those faces, I think, that the truth of Rome lies. Not in the roar of the crowd, but in the silences between. The city is not only violence and hunger, it is also weariness, longing, quiet despair. These faces, fleeting as they are, remind me that beneath the spectacle, we are still human, fragile, uncertain, alive. When the games end and the people stream back into the streets, the crowd dissolves into individuals again. The noblewoman returns to her villa, the butcher to his stall, the beggar to his corner. But for a few hours, within those walls, they were one body, one voice, one hunger. The faces in the crowd are many, but in the roar, they are one. And that, perhaps, is the most dangerous thing of all. After the roar, there is always silence. It does not come all at once, but slowly, like smoke thinning in the wind. The cheers fade, the laughter dwindles. The gamblers pocket their coins with trembling fingers. One by one, the people file out of the Colosseum, their sandals scraping against stone, their voices hushed as though the spectacle has stolen their tongues. I have walked those streets many times, basket empty at my side, and felt the strange stillness that settles over Rome after the games. It is as if the city itself exhales. 50,000 throats roar together, and then nothing. Only the flutter of birds startled from the eaves, the rattle of a cartwheel, the soft cry of a child too weary to keep pace. Inside the arena, slaves rake the sand, smoothing away the footprints, sweeping the crimson clots into piles. Carts creak as they haul the bodies away, fighters and beasts alike, stripped of armor, stripped of name. By dawn, the sand will be clean again, golden and fresh, as though nothing had happened. But we who heard the roar know otherwise. It is in this silence, more than in the noise, that the truth of Rome reveals itself. Not in the cries of victory, not in the chants for death, but in the emptiness that follows, the weight that presses on the chest when the voices fall still. The crowd does not speak of it, not openly. We chatter about wagers won and lost, about fighters who fought bravely or fell quickly. We name our favorites. We gossip of their scars, their victories, their rumored affairs. But beneath the words lies something we do not say. The quiet unease, the hollowness that follows the feast of blood. Children grow restless, no longer amused. Mothers clutch their little ones closer, as though to guard them from dreams that might follow. Old men stare at the ground, lips tight, their steps slower than before. Some rush to taverns to drown the silence in wine. Others retreat to their homes to hide from it. Few admit what gnaws at them, that for all the spectacle, for all the bread and blood, we are left emptier than before. I have felt it myself. I return home, set my basket aside, and sit in the dim glow of a lamp. The silence seems heavier there, as though it has followed me from the arena gates. My ears still ring with echoes, yet around me all is still. I chew my bread, I sip my watered wine, but the taste is ash, the drink thin. For what can fill a stomach that has been made to feast on blood? Sometimes in that silence I think of the fighters themselves. Where are they now? Those who triumphed sit in the dim barracks of the ludus, their wounds bound, their faces blank with exhaustion. Those who fell are gone, their bodies dragged away, their names already fading from memory. And I ask myself, is Rome any different from them? We rise, we cheer, we consume, and then we fall silent, hollow, waiting for the next spectacle to fill the void. The empire is vast, but perhaps it too lives between roar and silence, never satisfied, always hungering. I have wondered if this is why we cling to the games so fiercely, not because they bring joy, but because they keep us from hearing the silence too long. For in that silence, questions stir about who we are, what we have become, what price is paid for our bread and our blood. Better to drown it in noise, to bury it in spectacle. But silence has a way of returning, always. And yet I do not despise it. No, I have come to think the silence is the only honest part of it all. In the roar we lose ourselves, in the silence we remember. I sit with it sometimes, letting it settle over me like a cloak. I breathe it in, feel its weight on my shoulders. It is heavy, yes, but it is real. It reminds me that the gladiators are men, not phantoms. That the blood on the sand was not illusion, but life spilled out. That the bread I hold is not free, but bought with suffering. The silence asks what the roar will never let us ask. Is this Rome? Is this all we are? A city that eats bread with one hand and claps for death with the other? I do not know the answer. Perhaps no one does. But I know this. When the voices fade, when the sand is raked smooth, when the lamps burn low and only the stars bear witness, Rome feels smaller. Not the empire that conquers the world, but a city huddled in its own shadow, listening to the echo of what it has done. That is the weight of silence. It presses on us all. They call it Gloria. Glory, as though it were a crown of laurel resting lightly on the brow. They speak of it in marble halls, in polished forums, in the whispers of poets and the boasts of senators. Glory, they say, is what the games bring to Rome. Glory is what gilds the sand red, what lifts the common man's spirit, what binds the empire together beneath one roar. But when I think of glory, I see chains. Not only the iron shackles clamped around the ankles of fighters in the ludus, though those are the truest. I see invisible chains, too. Links of hunger, of spectacle, of habit. Chains that bind the crowd to the games as surely as the fighters are bound to their masters. For who among us can turn away when the gates open? Who can resist the pull of that word, glory, when it rings from a herald's lips? I have seen gladiators paraded through the streets after a great victory. Their armor gleamed, polished by slaves until it shone like bronze fire in the sun. Laurel wreaths crowned their heads, and flowers rained upon them from balconies. Women leaned from windows, shouting their names, tossing ribbons into the air. Men clapped and sang, calling them heroes, as though a single fight had made them sons of Mars himself. And yet, look closer, and you see the truth. Beneath the wreaths are scars. Beneath the polished greaves, twisted flesh. The smile on a victor's lips is often thin, forced, his eyes dark with exhaustion. He is chained even as he is praised, for he cannot leave the barracks, cannot choose his fate, cannot claim the glory as his own. It belongs to Rome, always to Rome. There was one fighter I recall, a Murmillo, broad-shouldered, his helmet adorned with a tall crest. His name, the crowd said, was Quixus, though who knows if it was given or taken. He had won 3 matches in a row, and when he was led through the streets, the people cheered him like a general. Children ran alongside, men lifted their hands in salute, women whispered his name as though it carried magic. I stood at the edge of the crowd, clutching my basket, and I saw his eyes through the slits of his helmet. They were not proud, they were weary. He looked at the crowd not as a man basking in their love, but as a prisoner dragged before them, forced to wear his chains as garlands. The lanista who owned him smiled broadly, strutting beside him like a rooster, accepting the praises as though they belonged to him. And in a way they did, for it was he who would decide if the victor ate meat that night or went hungry. It was he who would sell the fighter's fame for coin, arranging matches, bargaining with officials. Glory was only a mask, a paint smeared over the face of servitude. When the crowd shouted, "Glory to Rome!" they meant the empire, not the man. The gladiator was merely a vessel, filled and emptied until broken. And yet there is something cruelly seductive about it. I have felt it myself, standing in the Colosseum, swept away by the chant of thousands. For a moment I forget the chains, I forget the lash, the barracks, the scars. All I see is a man raising his sword, blood on his chest, light glinting off steel, and I think, this is greatness, this is glory. But when the chant fades, I remember. I remember that the same man who stood proud in the arena must shuffle back to his cell, bruised and bleeding, while the crowd feasts and drinks in his name. I remember that tomorrow he may be thrown against a new foe, or a beast, or death itself, no matter how loudly we called him hero today. Is glory still glory when it cannot be kept? When it lasts only as long as the roar of the crowd and vanishes like smoke the moment the sand is raked clean? I have come to believe that Rome itself is bound by these chains. We hunger for glory as the fighters do for water, and we feed it with lives not our own. We dress chains in laurel, we polish shackles until they gleam, and we call it honor. When I walk past the ludus at dusk, I sometimes imagine a man lying on straw, staring at the ceiling, his wounds itching. Perhaps he whispers to himself, not in Latin, but in some distant tongue, words from a mother or a wife he will never see again. Perhaps he dreams of freedom, though he knows it will not come. And in the morning, he will be clothed in armor, painted with false glory and pushed into the sun. Glory is a chain bright enough to blind us, heavy enough to crush us. Rome wears it proudly, and so do we. But I wonder how long a people can wear chains, even golden ones, before the weight becomes too much to bear. That is what I see when I hear the word Gloria. Not laurel crowns, only chains clinking softly beneath the roar of the crowd. The games end, but Rome endures. That is what they say. And yet when I walk through the streets after the final roar has faded, I do not see endurance. I see shadows. They cling to the alleys, to the corners where beggars crouch, to the thresholds where weary mothers cradle their children. They hang heavy over the temples where incense still rises, but prayers feel unanswered. They stretch across the cobblestones, across the faces of men who drink too deeply, laugh too loudly, desperate to bury what they have witnessed. The Colosseum itself casts the greatest shadow. Even when empty, its walls loom like a mountain of stone, blotting out the sun. By day, it is magnificent, a marvel of Rome's power. By night, it becomes something else. A husk, its arches dark, its silence more fearsome than the roar it once held. I have walked past it beneath the moon and felt its presence like a cold hand upon my shoulder. Rome calls it glory, but to me, it is a shadow we all live under, one we cannot escape. I think often of the men inside the walls of the ludus, those I never saw yet always felt near. Their breaths, their sweat, their blood, all bound to my own life in ways I could never have chosen. They fought for Rome, but they also fought for me. My bread was cheaper because of them, my distractions richer, my afternoons filled. And in return, I gave them silence. I gave them absence. Not once did I speak their names in prayer. Not once did I carry water to the gate or bread to the hungry hands of their kin. I was content to watch, to eat, to drink, to cheer, and then to walk away. And that, I fear, is the deepest shadow of all, not theirs, but mine. Rome is a city of chains, yes, but also of mirrors. We look into the games and see ourselves reflected. The hunger, the cruelty, the longing for spectacle. We call it entertainment, but in truth it is a lesson, and not a gentle one. There are moments, rare but real, when I imagine Rome without the games. A city where the amphitheater stands empty, where the only cries are those of children at play, where blood does not soak the sand, but waters the fields beyond the walls. What would we be then? Would Rome crumble without its spectacles, as some say? Would the people rise against the emperors if bread were given without blood? Or would we learn, slowly, painfully, to find glory elsewhere, in harvests, in ships launched to distant shores, in the laughter of free men? I do not know. Perhaps no one does. Perhaps the shadow of Rome is too long, stretching further than even time can erase. But still I dream it in the quiet of the night, when the city sleeps and the Colosseum looms dark against the stars. And so I remain, a vendor, a Roman, a witness. I have sold my bread, I have heard the roar, I have walked through the silence. I have lived in the shadow of gladiators I never knew, and yet who shaped my life in ways beyond measure. They are gone now, most of them, their names erased, their bones buried in shallow graves or tossed into pits. The sand has been raked smooth 1,000 times since. And still Rome goes on, and still the shadow lingers. Perhaps that is the true legacy of the games. Not the marble arches, not the inscriptions carved in stone, not even the stories whispered by poets, but the shadow they cast, across men and women, across generations, across the very soul of Rome. I am old now. My steps are slower, my basket lighter. I do not know how long I will walk these streets, nor how many more times I will pass beneath the arches of that monstrous arena. But I know this, the shadow will outlive me. It will outlive us all. Rome will shine, Rome will boast, Rome will conquer. But beneath it, always, there will be the shadow of blood, of chains, of silence. The shadow of men who fought, not for themselves, but for the hunger of others. And when the last stone falls, when the Colosseum crumbles into dust and grass grows where lions once roared, perhaps that shadow will remain still, drifting like a ghost, whispering to the wind of what Rome once was and what it chose to be. That is what I leave behind. Not triumph, not glory, only shadows.